Hello and welcome to A Sound Constitution here on CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics important to our community. This year's team is made up of 5 third-year VIU nursing students. Our goal is to demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable resources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We want to give a reminder to our listeners that the information presented in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us on Facebook at A Sound Constitution, Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution, all one word, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. I'm your host Cameron, and today our episode is focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, with a focus on personal injury. This will be a jam-packed show with an anonymous story about personal injury, information about SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and some fun facts on how you can keep yourself safe and advocate for your safety within your city. I am very excited to let you all know that we have a special guest on our show today as well, Nicole Smith, a personal injury lawyer from Ramsey-Lachman Rhodes here in Nanaimo. I hope you guys enjoy learning about this segment as much as I did. And without further ado, let's start A Sound Constitution Episode 3, SDG 11 and Personal Injury. We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Sunamo people, with a broadcasting range that overlaps the Kewatsin and Sliamon territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Sunamo people and with the intention to increase awareness about truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding Sunamo history, reconciliation, protocol, and land acknowledgement can be found on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages. So today's episode is all about personal injury and Sustainable Development Goal 11. Now you might be wondering, what even is SDG 11 and why should I care? Well, in short, SDG 11 is all about making cities safe, inclusive, and sustainable. The United Nations has outlined 7 targets and indicators for ways to improve the safety and sustainability of cities. In today's episode, our show focuses primarily on Target 11.2, providing access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems, improving road safety, and paying special attention to those in vulnerable situations. If you would like to read more about the 7 targets for SDG 11, the United Nations website will be referenced in our show notes located on our social media. To further explain and understand SDG 11, let's listen to an audio clip from the organization Participate.
Everyone deserves to live in a world where our cities and communities are designed to be inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We all have a role to play in helping the UN achieve this goal by the year 2030. But the idea of a sustainable city isn't new. Ancient civilizations like the Greeks designed cities for the benefits of all citizens. They made it easy to travel by planning streets in straight lines They kept everyone fed and watered by setting up markets and building aqueducts, and even pioneered public parks where citizens could relax in nature. Today, our definition of livability has evolved to reflect the needs of people living in a modern world. We want people to feel safe to travel through their communities, to have access to affordable housing, and connect with their neighbours in shared spaces and at public events, because communities thrive when people develop a sense of ownership and belonging. It's easy to feel isolated from a community. It happens in big cities when buildings are not designed to give disabled people access. It happens in small towns when reduced public transport links make it impossible for the elderly to participate in society. But lots of good things are being done to help people feel connected to their communities. The Kilis refugee camp in Turkey, for example, is a temporary community that was designed to last. Managed by the Turkish government, residents live in concrete shelters rather than makeshift tents, giving them a sense of stability. In Scotland, Rex Afsal set up a community fridge where people could access food donated by local businesses. And in New York, a disused railway bed was transformed into the High Line, an eye-catching public space where citizens can mingle or relax. Ideas like this can help create a safer, more inclusive future for everyone.
Welcome back to A Sound Constitution with CHLY 101.7 FM. You just listened to an audio clip from the organization Participate. It was called Understand Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. If you would like to listen to this clip again, we will have it referenced in our show notes on our social media. As the audio clip described, creating safe and sustainable cities is important as it impacts everyone, everywhere. The safer your city, the less likely you are to become injured. And who wants to become injured? Your community and its environment plays a major factor in your health. Access to safe sidewalks, bike lanes, crosswalks, and smoke-free areas are all ways to increase your safety and health while in your community. The Provincial Health Services Authority suggests that when planning policy and designing cities, health and physical accessibility should be kept in mind to create healthy areas for citizens. When citizens don't have access to safe methods of transportation or environments, injuries might happen. Now, injury can happen from falls, motor vehicle accidents, work sites, and in many other ways. And according to Provincial Health Services Authority, Nanaimo had 11,446 people hospitalized due to injury from 2006 to 2011. Now, that's a lot of people. But what can you do if you're injured? Stay tuned for more as we discuss this later on in our episode.
What are the best practices for preventing pedestrian collisions? Wide, well-lit, well-maintained sidewalks, pedestrian-activated crossing signals, pedestrian refuge islands for crossing wide streets, right-turning islands, sidewalks on both sides of all streets, speed bumps, traffic circles, and wearing bright clothing, lights, and reflectors to improve visibility when walking.
According to the BC Injury Research and Prevention Unit, pedestrians who use their cell phones when crossing the street are almost 4 times more likely to demonstrate unsafe behavior, such as missing safe opportunities to cross or failing to look both ways before crossing. They are also at higher risk of being hit or almost hit by oncoming vehicles. When crossing the street, make sure you are alert and focusing on what is happening around you.
Personal injury is something that we usually can't avoid. You might be doing everything right and still find yourself in the unfortunate circumstance of injury. There are thousands of British Columbians who have experienced personal injury, and today we have an anonymous story that was shared with us. The following story reflects on the importance of safe roads and the concerns regarding BC support systems for those injured. This story was shared to us by a person living through the effects of a motor vehicle accident. This story will be told in a way in which respects and promotes this person's anonymity. The story's identifying details have been wholly omitted or changed. I asked my teammate Dana to read the letter given to us. We thank this person for their willingness to share their story and their experience. So, without further ado, I will pass the mic to Dana to share this anonymous story.
My best friend and I always walked the same route a few times a week. It wound through quiet neighborhoods, out through some trails, then back along a main road to one of our houses. This winter night walk started no different than any other walk. The path along the main road in our town has a sidewalk and a light-controlled crosswalk. We came to the crosswalk, waited for the lights to turn red, and crossed when the pedestrian flashed. I don't remember much after, except my friend grabbing me by the back of the collar and saying, "He's going to hit us." Her grab ended up spinning me to face the truck as it hit me. It was the last memory I had before I was knocked unconscious. I woke up under the front of the truck, confused and disoriented. Good Samaritans had rushed over to check on me, but my only thought was, can I wiggle my toes and fingers? Thankfully I could. In my shock, I hadn't noticed all my other injuries. Fast forward 8 years and I'm thankful to be alive, but my journey has not been easy and has left me with many questions about how the accident happened in the first place and how anyone can navigate the systems we have in BC for injured people. I am left with permanent injury. I suffered a brain injury which affects my hearing and auditory processing at times. I had soft tissue and joint damage to my lower limb that took multiple surgeries to fix. Then there were the years of rehabilitation services to get to the point I can function well for the most part, though I have pain daily. My friend was also struck, and for that she has an arm, the one that saved me, that will never work properly again. She has also had surgeries and years of rehabilitation services, but will never have full use of her arm again, and she also lives with pain. Because my accident happened so many years ago, I was on the old ICBC system, and I had a lawyer to help me. I am thankful I did because everything was a battle. Because I did not have any broken bones and important imaging was missed the night of my accident, my doctor didn't know what was causing my pain and concentration issues. It took years of battling the health system in ICBC to find out what was wrong with me. And that was because my lawyer was able to get me into specialists and private MRIs. In a country that is supposed to have universal healthcare, I had to find private services to be treated. Once we had proof of what was wrong, it was then time to play the surgery waitlist game. It took 3 years to get through my surgeries, and by then, the pain was permanent. A private clinic assessed my head injury with a report saying that it was just the way it was now for me. I would have permanent deficits. Throughout this entire event was a second battle, the one that happened at work. I am lucky my employer is endlessly supportive. They were great, and I had a supportive manager and a disability team that worked with me. I could take as long as I needed to get better, and in fairness to ICBC, I did get support for rehabilitation throughout work and had wage support. But a few times over the years, the physical nature of my job meant I'd experienced injury related to my accident. Then the battle between WCBC and ICBC would start about who would have to pay. Sometimes it was suffocating being stuck between these two government agencies that are supposed to be there to help, yet are trying to pass off responsibility first chance they get. I can't imagine how much worse it would be for me if I had a job that was not as supportive. So that's my story, sorta. I live with chronic pain and a head injury, but I'm lucky to still work a job I love and have great support. I still have to attend physio or kinesiology when I get flares up in my pain, and I had to limit what work I can do within my career. The spot we were hit, we weren't the first, nor were we the last. Even though it's a lighted crosswalk and controlled by street lights, there is no left turn signal, yet turning left is the main point of the intersection as it puts you into the parking lot of a bunch of box stores. I have walked past this crosswalk numerous times over the years, and I am a lot more aware of the lighting. It surprises me how many crosswalks have zero streetlights, or streetlights that are too dim, especially on dark rainy nights, something we're all familiar with on the island. The intersection has never been updated with new lighting or a dedicated left turn signal. It is still a risk for other people. Since my accident, I am a strong advocate for cities fixing unsafe intersections, and that includes things like good lighting and proper streetlight setup, like having a left turn signal for intersections where turning left is common. Even though it wasn't part of the problem for me, I am hyper aware at how many streets do not have sidewalks. This is especially true for more rural areas where there isn't even a proper shoulder. I see kids getting off school buses with nowhere safe to walk. People take their pets out for strolls and walk on the road because there is nowhere else to go. But I also see pedestrians not take safety into consideration. People jaywalk across busy highways and take a big leap of faith we will stop and see them when we're driving. People walk at night with zero reflective safety gear. It doesn't take much. Even a blinking light somewhere on your body can make a difference in cars seeing you as you walk. This is true for pets too. Make sure they have reflective gear on. As for ICBC, I vehemently disagree with what the government has done. I think about what would have happened to me if I was on this new system. I would have been abandoned years ago. Who knows if I would have ever had my pain diagnosed or my surgeries done? Who knows if my brain injury would have ever finally been assessed? I really worry for those that do not have the support that I did.
Thank you, Dana, for sharing that story with us, and thank you to the individual who allowed us to share that today. If you are just tuning in now, you are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM, and my name is Cameron, and I am your host today as we discuss personal injury. We just listened to a story by an anonymous donor, read aloud by my teammate Dana. This story discussed the motor vehicle accident that this individual went through, the personal injury that followed, and how it was dealt with by ICBC. To gain more insight into the process of ICBC claims and the impact on those injured through personal injury accidents, I contacted an expert in the field. Stay tuned, because after this short break, we will be interviewing a personal injury lawyer from Nanaimo. Welcome back to A Sound Constitution with CHLY 101.7 FM. My name is Cameron, and today we are talking about personal injury and Sustainable Development Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. I would like to tell you a little bit about who I had the chance to interview this week. Nicole Smith has been practicing law for 13 years and is a partner at Ramsay Lapman Rhodes on Vancouver Island. Nicole works exclusively in the areas of personal injury and long-term disability claims. She is a former member for the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society and a former vice president of the Child Development Centre Board of Directors. Nicole is currently chair of the Canadian Client Consultation Committee. I was lucky enough to sit down with Nicole and discuss personal injury. I hope you enjoy this interview. Thank you for joining us today, Nicole.
Thanks, Cameron, for having me.
So, to get started with our interview, our first question is, what is personal injury law?
Well, I'm a personal injury lawyer, so the type of law that I do is I help people that have been injured in any number of different ways. They could be injured in motor vehicle accidents, or another category that we call as a slip and fall, right? You probably have heard that a lot. Or it could even be something like the classic McDonald's hot coffee type case. So if you've had an injury and someone else is responsible for that injury, then you would hire a personal injury lawyer if you chose to try and get some compensation for that.
Okay. So in what scenarios can a third party be responsible for injuries and suffering that a person may sustain?
Well, let's take it back to something really basic. A motor vehicle accident. Say that you're driving and you're rear-ended, and it's the other person's fault that you were rear-ended. You didn't back into them. In that situation, up until recently, you could sue the other driver's insurance for benefits, or if they didn't have insurance, it's them personally. Another scenario, one that I did a little while ago, which I thought was pretty interesting, was there was someone who actually ended up suing a friend, which is never very pleasant. But again, if there's insurance involved, you always name the individual, but the insurance company will normally step in if nobody did something intentionally. But in that scenario, they were exiting stairs outside a back deck, and the light didn't work, so there was no light, and they were using a cell phone to provide light to see where the stairs ended. And someone had helpfully put reflective striping on each stair, so the stairs illuminated as they walked down, but they didn't put it on the last stair. So,
oh, no.
Yeah. So the woman fell because she thought she'd come to the bottom of the stairs and had not. And she severely injured her knee in the course of the fall. And as a result, had made the difficult decision to sue. But thankfully, the friend understood the reasoning why, because she lost work and had to have surgery. So it was a pretty significant injury.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a lot of different reasons why people may call you for help. I've heard a little bit about limitation dates. What does this mean and what are they?
So the idea behind a limitation date is that people only have a certain amount of time to file a claim in court in order to bring an action, right? And the reason that you do that is right now the typical one is 2 years. With COVID, they extended it by a year. So if you sustain an injury after March 15th, I think is the date, sometime in March of 2020, then you've got actually 3 years to bring a claim rather than 2. Mm-hmm. But the policy reason behind doing that is you want to be fair to the person you're suing. If you wait too long, then they may have gotten rid of information that could have defended them, or that might have let them escape from any type of blameworthy, any proof that they'd had. So if you don't do it within the 2 years, you're out of time and you're not allowed to sue.
So the sooner the better, really.
Well, there's actually reasons that you may want to wait, but the sooner you get legal advice, the better. And then follow the lawyer's advice. We never want to wait past a limitation date. That would get us in trouble with the Law Society and eliminate, in most cases, your claim. But you do want to talk to a lawyer and follow that advice.
So what is your general advice when people call you and tell you that they are hurt?
Well, before I give any advice, I need to find out what happened. Sometimes people are hurt through no one else's fault, and there is no claim there. And in those situations, I have to tell people, look, if you're injured on your own property, chances are you're not going to have a claim. If you are injured because you weren't watching where you were going, chances are you probably don't have a claim if it's something that a reasonable person should have been aware of and seen. But, if you're injured and it's somebody else's fault, then the advice that I give is usually do what you would do to get better. Pretend like you weren't injured at the fault of somebody else. Try and put that thought out of your mind and actually take the steps that you would take to get better as if you didn't have a claim. Don't let the claim dictate what you do. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So kind of put your health first. Do whatever you can to try and get back to your health that you were at the beginning before the accident. Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting way that you put that, because that's the principle of law. So one of the things, the guiding principle in personal injury law is that if you're going to get compensation, it's to put you back to the position you would have been in if the accident hadn't occurred, as far as money can do that. And so the whole idea is we want to put you back to try and make you whole, as that whole person that you were before. And when you're injured, you actually have obligations as well. You don't just get to bring a claim and blame everybody else for things that fall as a consequence of the accident that happened. You have some responsibilities, and those include taking reasonable steps to get better. It's called mitigating your loss. If you don't take the steps you need to try to get better, then you actually may be held partly responsible for any ongoing injury. Interesting. I didn't realize that law had such an impact on promoting health.
Well, yeah, it actually does. And in a different way, personal injury law has a really significant impact on promoting health.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think back to that example I gave of the client I'd had who fell on the stair that wasn't illuminated, where every other stair had their reflective striping. So, typically you'd hope that after being sued and having to pay a settlement, they would realize the mistake they had made and not do something like that again or fix it. We did a trial once where there was a speed bump in a parking lot locally in town. And there was, the way that the speed bump was created, it was two speed bumps in a line separated by a dip, right? So kind of traffic, one-way traffic the other, and then a dip in between. And they painted the entire strip, both the bump of the speed bump and then the dip, yellow. So what happened was an elderly man is walking across the speed bump and he doesn't realize there's a dip because it's all painted yellow. And again, he fell and hurt himself quite badly. That case actually went to trial, and we were successful in showing that they were negligent in maintaining or failing to maintain that parking lot and that speed bump in a way that was safe for people. It constituted what's called an unreasonable risk of harm. And so as a result, they had to pay damages for his injuries. And then, if you were to go to that parking lot now, you would find that speed bump is not painted that way. They fixed it.
That's quite interesting. And, it relates to the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, that we are talking about today, as it shows how your job and the law directly impacts how we ensure that our city is safe for everyone. Do you have any other examples of how a law might have impacted our city?
Yeah, actually, I do have lots of examples, because in almost every case like this, that's where you're going to, there's hopefully going to be a change that results. For example, say you walk into any fast food restaurant and they've mopped the floor, there's going to be a sign that usually says careful wet floors. Well, where there's a sign? At some point when there wasn't a sign, someone fell. And as a result of probably a lawsuit after that, there's now signage up to warn people. You also, though, find criticism we get are from those who think that we've taken it too far and people should be responsible for their own safety. And my counter argument to that is that what is wrong with making things more safe? What is wrong with having to put up a sign? It's not a be all and end all. If a sign's not there, that doesn't mean someone's automatically responsible. Businesses are only held to something called a reasonable standard. What I mean by that, and I'll just give another example if that's okay. Say, for example, I get a lot of calls about people that fall in a grocery store or a big box store, and maybe they slipped on some water. Well, if it was a rainy day or a snowy day, and they slip on water inside the store, we have to look at, should the person have expected there's going to be some water in the store? But more importantly, what is the system that the store had in place to inspect and repair? So what I mean by that is, if you go in a bathroom in a store, there's usually a check box where an employee has to check off that they've looked at the bathroom to make sure it's clean, right? And you've probably had to do that in the past yourself if you've worked in restaurants. And that's because they have to be able to show that they have inspected it and made sure that it's safe every 15 minutes or whatever the store determines is an appropriate amount of time. So if a grocery store has said, hey, every 20 minutes, we're doing a walk around to make sure that there's no puddles of water that people can fall in, or there's no pallets, say like empty pallets entering into a walkway that people might trip on, or displays haven't been knocked over.
Looking for hazards.
Yeah. If they can show that they've looked for hazards, whatever frequency that they said was important, if they show that they complied with it, it's very difficult to have a claim against them. If, however, they say our policy is to check it every 15 minutes, and then we can show that they didn't do it for 2 hours, that's where you have a claim.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, the fact that there is a possibility of a claim forces businesses to keep things safe.
If you are just tuning in now, you are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. My name is Cameron, and I am your host today on A Sound Constitution. At this point in the episode, we are talking to Nicole Smith, a personal injury lawyer in Nanaimo, BC, and we are talking all things personal injury. Stay tuned for more. So it sounds like a lot of your job promotes safety and changes policy to make sure that areas are safe for all, and an impact of that would be decreased claims later on, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's more of a byproduct of the job, hopefully. Our job is to promote the interests of the person that hired us and to try and ensure that in a case where health benefits are part of what the insurance company is obligated to do, ensure that they get those benefits, but also ensure that they're fully compensated for their loss. So that's my job, is for the person who was injured. But a byproduct, hopefully, is that communities are made safer as a result.
On social media, I often see claims that people are faking their injuries after motor vehicle accidents just to get money at the end of the day. Can you talk a little bit to this?
Yeah, well, even worse than that are the claims from, the portrayal of slip and falls in movies or TV shows, right? You're going to see the person who has the big neck brace on and the cane, and then they whip it off as soon as they get home. That's often, the shyster. It's an unfortunate stereotype, right? But my response to that is, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I've represented hundreds of clients. And if I suspect that they're not being truthful and they're not actually injured, then I'm not going to take it on, or I'm not going to continue with the claim. Think about the dedication someone would have to have in order to pull off a stunt like that if they're not actually injured, because these claims are not finished quickly. We always tell people that you don't want to try to resolve your claim until you are better, or until doctors and typically specialists have said this is as good as it gets. You're not going to get any better than that. And that's because we want to know what you're left with. We talked about a limitation date earlier, where we talked about the 2 years to file the claim. That doesn't mean the claim is wrapped up in 2 years, and that would be the exception, not the rule, to have a claim finished within 2 years. 2 years is when you have to file it in court. You can still continue negotiations or bring it to trial after that, but 2 years is very quick for a personal injury claim to resolve. So if you think about, if someone's faking it, they have to fake it for years, right? They'd have to go to the doctor for years, go to treatment.
Have all these professional people also somehow agree that they're injured when they're not.
Right. And often these claims involve the insurance company sending the person who's claiming to be injured to their own doctor to evaluate, right? If someone is receiving compensation at the end of an injury, the vast majority of times it's going to be because they deserve that compensation.
Right.
So that's kind of my response to the stereotypes. I know that ICBC years ago was running ads where they were talking about, they had a guy biking through the woods, and then he got a phone call and he said, "Oh, wow, I'm at physio right now." Well, they did that on purpose. They did that to try to demonize people that are injured, to have the public become angry with those who are making claims against the insurance system so they could bring in the new system that they have now.
So it's pretty much blaming the victim.
It's exactly blaming the victim.
So along with this new system you're talking about, I have heard a bit about the enhanced care system in the media. What does this mean?
The enhanced care is such a misnomer. So as of May 1st, 2021, if you are in a motor vehicle accident, the whole system by which you could bring a claim is changed. So it used to be, before 2019, if you were in a motor vehicle accident, the principle of law was, like I mentioned earlier, put you back in the position you would have been in if the accident hadn't occurred. So you could bring a claim for your injury, for your out-of-pocket expenses, for lost wages. You could do it on your own, or you could hire a lawyer. The venue, so where you would bring it to be adjudicated if you couldn't reach a negotiated agreement, would be either small claims court or BC Supreme Court, depending on the value of your claim. After 2019, April 1st of 2019, which is a very fitting date, the government brought in something called minor injury regulations, where they said if you have a minor injury, then the value of your claim for pain and suffering loss is capped at $5,500. You could still be reimbursed for some of your out-of-pocket, I believe, and wage loss.
What counts as a minor injury in this case?
So what they actually legislated, what they said were minor injuries. So let me ask you, I'll give you some things and you tell me if you think they would be minor or not.
Okay.
Fracture.
I'd say that's pretty major if it impacts your day-to-day life and your job.
You're right. A fracture was not a minor injury under the government's definition. What about a concussion?
I'd say that's major as well. If it's your brain.
That is not. A concussion is a minor injury under the definition. Oh. How about soft tissue injuries?
I'd say that's pretty major as well.
Really? Why do you say that?
as, you know, a nursing student, we learn a lot about different types of injuries, and soft tissue can really impact and cause chronic pain in your day-to-day. So, I mean, depending on the severity of the injury, I think it's pretty subjective. It depends on the amount of injury.
And how long the injury lasts, right?
Yeah.
So depending on how long the injury lasts, the government said there were some ways that you could get out of that minor injury definition cap. One of the ways is that if your injury is a concussion or a mental health injury, if you are out of work, so not able to work for more than 16 weeks, then maybe you can get out of that injury cap definition. Another way is if you are not able to work for a year, but also not able to do your regular activities of daily living, so caring for yourself or your household for a year, then it's possible you can also get out of the cap that way. But none of those things really matter anymore, because as of May 1st, 2021, we have the new system in place, which is the no fault, or what they are calling the enhanced care model.
If you are just tuning in now, you are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. My name is Cameron, and I am your host today on A Sound Constitution. At this point in the episode, we are talking to Nicole Smith, a personal injury lawyer in Nanaimo, BC, and we are talking all things personal injury. Stay tuned for more. So how does this new no-fault system impact injured people?
Okay, so the first thing to know is it's only to do with motor vehicle accident claims, right?
Okay.
ICBC would have you know, and the government would have you think that it helps people because it's going to provide easier access to care, and there's more money available for care. That's what they say. In the past, under the old system, we had something called Part 7 benefits, and that's just because Part 7 is the section of the insurance motor vehicle regulation that covers accident benefits. So we just call it that for short.
Okay.
So you had up to $300,000 available for expenses you needed under those Part 7 benefits or your no-fault accident benefits even before this change. The $300,000, that was just for things like physio and chiro and massage. The vast majority of people got nowhere near to using $300,000. Very few people ever actually used the entire amount available to them before anyway.
So there was excess money left over.
Well, yeah, people didn't use the amount that was available. So now under enhanced care, you have $7.5 million available to you. But you can have all the money in the world, but someone has to approve for you to be allowed to spend it. So you have the same gatekeepers saying whether or not they think you actually need the care before you can access it. So it's kind of, you know, it's kind of misleading to say there's $7.5 million available to you for care when someone has to decide whether or not you get it. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, you need physiotherapy following an accident. Well, right away, both before and now, if you needed it, you can go within the first few weeks after the accident. I think it's first 8 to 12 weeks. You can go in with a claim number to the treater. They submit a plan to ICBC to get approval, and you can start treatment right away, which is great because those first weeks are really critical. And so if your doctor says you need treatment, go get that treatment. What you need for that, again, is a claim number. You go in. Now, though, what treaters have to do is they submit a treatment plan to ICBC at the end of whatever number of weeks. If ICBC approves the treatment plan, great, you continue going for treatment. If they don't approve the treatment plan, you maybe can try to go back to your doctor and get your doctor to give you a new note to try and encourage or force them to approve the treatment plan. Have your doctor weigh in. In the past, me as the lawyer would do that step. If ICBC said my client wasn't going to get any more chiropractic treatment, but they were finding it really helpful, I would tell the client, go to the doctor, ask your doctor. If your doctor says you still need it, then bring me a note that says you need it so that I can then use that note.
Advocate for them.
Yeah, and make the argument that you should get the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
With the enhanced care model, because there is no claim for pain and suffering unless you sustain what's called a catastrophic injury. And that's, say you're rendered a quadriplegic or you have to lose 50% of your brain function.
Oh gosh.
For that. Otherwise, there's no claim. So there's no way really to pay the lawyer unless you're going to pay them by the hour. So with what lawyers charge, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense usually to hire a lawyer to advocate for you to get your physio covered.
Right.
Because that might cost more than that physio did. But when we were helping you as part of your claim before, when there was another aspect to your claim for pain and suffering, then we would also advocate for the treatment to continue. So now, you don't have anybody advocating on your behalf. I was speaking with a counselor the other day, not my counselor, just a friend of mine who is a counselor. And she said that what she finds right now with people that have been injured in accidents and they're dealing with ICBC now, she says at first they seem to make good progress. And then what's happening is that once treatments start to be denied, or they have to start fighting with ICBC or arguing with them and advocating on their own behalf in order to get coverage approved, they're so stressed out that so much of the session she has with them is then focused on them trying to decompress and talking about their experience with ICBC rather than on moving forward and trying to heal from the injury itself.
Right.
So this enhanced care model creates a relationship where you are working with or against your ICBC adjuster for months or years.
And what type of training do these adjusters have in determining whether or not treatment's helping you? Are they doctors? Like, do they have any specific training based?
Some of them
on
are
that?
kinesiologists.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't.
So your fate is pretty much in somebody else's hands.
Yeah. There are mechanisms to dispute it. You can go to the Civil Resolution Tribunal, which again is it can be pretty daunting, especially if you're dealing with a mental health issue or a concussion. You have to file a claim with the Civil Resolution Tribunal online and have them adjudicate it. You can appeal internally at ICBC, I believe, and there's a fairness commissioner now, or someone who's been appointed within ICBC. So you can ask to talk to a manager at ICBC. But again, you have to do this all on your own, and you have to do it when you're already struggling.
And if you don't know even where to begin, how would you find that information out, right?
Yeah, you can Google.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to have access even to a computer or to a phone to be able to Google. So
it does make it really disproportionately hard, I think, for people that are living in poverty, say, or if they're less functional intellectually.
Or seniors that don't use the technology, don't have the help they might need.
Yeah, I get phone calls a lot still from people that have been injured recently, and I have to kind of break it to them because a lot of people aren't aware of this, that there is no claim for pain and suffering anymore. And that if they have receipts, so if they've paid for things that aren't covered by ICBC, they're never going to get those receipts reimbursed. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is ICBC will pay a certain amount for different treatments. If you go for massage, they'll pay, it changes every year a little bit with inflation, but I think it's $84 to $86 right now. So if you go for half an hour, if you can find a massage therapist that does that, or 45 minutes, then you might be okay. But most massage therapists want to have clients to book for an hour, and you can't blame them because they're trying to maximize their day. So if you go see a massage therapist for an hour, you're going to pay probably between $110 and $120. ICBC will reimburse you, but only $84 to $86 of that. You're going to be out of pocket probably $30 a session.
Yeah.
And you're not ever going to get that back. Whereas before, when you got reimbursed, before they actually only paid $23 up front for massage.
But at the end of the day, you got reimbursed.
Yes, at the end of the day, you would get that money back through the claim against the other driver. And now there's no claim against the other driver, so you never get the money back.
Hence, no fault. Nobody's at fault, really.
Right. The only time that you can sue the other driver is if they're convicted of a criminal offense. So if they're a drunk driver, a lot of people think, okay, well, then I can sue. They were a drunk driver. They have to be convicted. Wow. So if they plead out to a lesser charge, or it doesn't go through a full trial, or if they plead guilty, then you're fine to the criminal conviction. But if for some reason they're found not guilty for whatever reason, then you can't sue either.
Wow. That's crazy. So I've also heard of other provinces having privatized insurance companies Would this be something that would benefit British Columbia?
Well, here's the thing. It's not ICBC's rules that have resulted in this no-fault model. It's the government's law. So the law changed. So any insurance company that comes in is going to administer the same laws. The other thing is that will never happen in BC. We're not going to have private insurance companies come in. And it's because ICBC provides way too much of a financial benefit for our province. What I mean by that is that before all of these changes were made to ICBC, first going to the minor injury legislation and then to the enhanced care or the no-fault model, back when it was full tort system where people could be compensated for their injury, ICBC was profitable for many, many, many years, and the government took hundreds of millions of dollars from ICBC to use it to balance their budget. And so they used the profits directly and put into general revenue. In addition, ICBC paid for a lot of things that private insurance companies will never pay for. They spent, when you get your driver's license renewed, ICBC pays to staff that office and to issue those new driver's licenses to you. And that costs a lot of money every year. And when they charge you for the driver's license, that money that you pay for your license goes to general revenue. Mm. So it's money that ICBC is incurring, but the profits go straight to the government, not to ICBC. ICBC also paid for a lot of road construction. Private insurance companies in Alberta or Saskatchewan or wherever don't pay for those things. So the impetus for bringing in the changes to the legislation and making this no-fault system was that ICBC was losing money, and they were calling it a dumpster fire, if you remember. Mm-hmm. There were only a couple years where they lost money.
So they're still coming out with a lot of money.
Oh, no, they're very profitable still. And so we'll never have, I predict we'll never have private insurance here because the government makes too much money off of ICBC.
Right. So if no-fault is the law, the only way to change the no-fault system is to change the law itself.
That's right. So private insurance is not going to change the no-fault system.
We have a private insurer come here. It's still going to be the same system, just a different company.
Yeah. And you have to ask yourself, if ICBC is making so much money now that it's no-fault, do you really think you're getting better care? That money is not being spent on you that they were saving.
Mm-hmm. So this seems like a major topic of concern. What is something that the public could do to change this or attempt to promote some change?
The only thing you can really do is talk to your MLA. I tried talking to my MLA before the change happened, and I was assured that if elected, that the NDP government would not bring in no fault. And then they did anyway. So I'm pretty jaded at this point, but the only thing that you really can do to change a law is to galvanize support, tell people around you, try and educate people, and then talk to your MLAs and vote for a party that you think might change it. I don't know if anybody would change it at this point, though, because they're making so much money that the government can use to balance the books. And it's on the backs of people that have been injured.
That's really unfortunate to hear. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our listeners today?
Well, the first thing I think it's important for me to say in concluding is that nothing I've said today should be considered legal advice. Everybody has unique situations, and you should speak with a lawyer and rely on the legal advice that the lawyer gives you for your situation. And second, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Well, thank you again, Nicole, for joining us today. It was a really informative interview, and I look forward to speaking with you again. If you are just tuning in now, you are listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. My name is Cameron, and I am your host for today's episode. I just had the chance to sit down with Nicole Smith, a personal injury lawyer in Nanaimo. We discussed types of personal injury, limitation dates, and the importance of advocating for your health and well-being. We also discussed how personal injury claims impact change within our cities to maintain, increase, and ensure safety for all. This ultimately results in the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. Nicole demonstrated how personal injury lawyers are fierce advocates for their client and work to ensure they are receiving everything they are entitled to after personal injury, such as a motor vehicle accident or slip and fall. We learn more about how the media impacts our perspective of personal injury victims and lawyers, and how this is a form of victim blaming. Nicole also brought forward the new law of the Enhanced Care System and no-fault insurance in BC. We discussed the impact that no-fault has on injured people and how the community can advocate to attempt to change this law. If you missed this interview or would like to hear it again, head over to our YouTube channel at A Sound Constitution at CHLY.
Falls are the second leading cause of unintentional injuries worldwide after road traffic crashes. While stairs are in our homes, workplaces, public and outdoor spaces, they can be dangerous and are a common place for injury to happen. In BC, stairs were involved in approximately 8.2% of all hospitalizations for fall-related injuries, with 68% of these falls on stairs happening in the home. Some ways to decrease the risk for falls on stairs is by limiting clutter on stairs, use handrails at all times, avoid loose carpets at the top or bottom of stairs, and avoid loose slippers or shoes. Take your time and turn on the lights.
Did you know that concussions are the most common form of brain injury? Each year in British Columbia, almost 600 people are hospitalized for a concussion-related injury.
Well, here we are at the end of another episode of A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM. This episode was packed full of information about Sustainable Development Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, personal injury, and some fun facts along the way. A huge thank you to Nicole Smith for joining us on the show today to discuss personal injury, your rights, and the impact her position has on Sustainable Development Goal 11. To reiterate, the information Nicole shared with us was for educational purposes only and should not be used as advice. If you or a loved one has experienced a form of personal injury, please discuss it personally with a lawyer. This episode was recorded in March of 2022. If you are listening at a later date, please be aware that some information may be changed. Thank you to my co-hosts for providing facts and tips about personal injury and SDG 11. And a special thank you to the anonymous listener for providing us with a first-hand experience on personal injury, and to my co-host Dana for reading that story. Lastly, thank you to our listeners for joining me today as I talked about the importance of SDG 11 and personal injury. While it was a lot to cover in a short amount of time, I hope you have learned something about Sustainable Development Goal 11 and personal injury in British Columbia. For details and show notes from today's episode, or to follow along on what's coming up this season, check out our Facebook page at A Sound Constitution and our Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution. If you've missed parts of this episode or would like to listen to this episode or episodes from our past shows, check out our YouTube at A Sound Constitution. Once again, my name is Cameron, and I was your host for this episode of A Sound Constitution. We'll see you all next week.